it's that conflict that seems to be normal, right? On one hand, you got the magic prayer, but then on the other hand, every little thing you do can be a sin, right?
That's
And you're trying to synthesize both, and it's hard, and it has a psychological impact.
it
And
does.
most times it causes you to not show up authentically,
Yep.
right? And so, but yeah, so now you go from Haggard's church, and then you started to become a part. I think you said it was a member of Concerned Women of America,
Right.
right? So tell us, because I never heard. I know about Tim and Beverly LaHaye because I think Tim LaHaye was the one that wrote the Left Behind series.
That's right.
And I read literally every last one of them.
Yeah, I did too.
I got it back there on my bookshelf. Every last one of them I read, right?
Yep.
But again, that was me as an adult adding the layers to my psychological conflict, and I didn't even know I was doing it. Right? I was being afraid to live because I wanted to make sure I wasn't left behind.
Right.
Right. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't left behind. And so now, Concerned Women for America, what was that about?
It's a political action group for women, basically.
Okay.
So it was basically fundamental evangelical Christian women who wanted to be involved in politics. And so they came together as a large group and kind of a lobbyist type of an organization in Washington, D.C. I don't know if they're still doing that or not. I haven't looked in a long time. But I've always enjoyed politics. And so, I would go to some of the bigger meetings and stuff. And it was just a way to basically have them teach us what we should believe about politics.
Have them teach us what we should believe. And I think that's what trips me out with religion now, because it's like, okay, you're wanting to teach me how I'm supposed to think, which leaves no room for me to do my own thinking. Right.
So they would list what their policy views were. And I think Focus on the Family does the same thing, but they list their political policy views, and then they would say this candidate lines up with it, this candidate does not line up, and so therefore you need to vote for this candidate because they line up with our views. Yeah. It was kind of that kind of stuff.
Gotcha. Now, up to this point, you're back in the church. You're super involved. It seems like, right?
Yes.
But you said something that I thought was very powerful. You said that after you started attending the Assembly of God Church, and these are your words, you learn how to love people.
Yes.
Now that I had to stop and rewind that, because at that point you're an adult, right? And you've been in church. You grew up in church. You left it for a while, you came back, but you're now at the Assembly of God Church, and you finally feel like you now learn how to love people. I need you to explain that. How is it that you felt like, just talk to me about that.
Okay, all right. So I guess because I grew up in, and then shortly after I became a Christian again, I grew up in mostly conservative type churches. When I went to, because of that, it was I don't ever remember learning things on how to love one another. I don't remember any of the one anothering type of things. And I don't even remember a whole lot on love or anything like that. It was more a list of to-dos. So, make sure you pray every day, make sure you read your Bible every day, make sure you ask for forgiveness for your sins every day. Make sure you get baptized, because you're not going to go to heaven if you don't pray the magic prayer and get baptized, so it was just a list of things to do, which is probably why I just totally walked away from the church when I was 18 and moved out. So, so I had never really learned that, and I didn't have much of that experience growing up. My mom was extremely reserved. I really don't remember having conversations with my mom when I was growing up. And she did not believe, and this was kind of a thing that they were taught in parenting. Who was it? I can't remember the name now. There was one parenting book at that time, and basically he taught them, don't spoil your kids by touching them or holding them. And so I had very, very little physical touch. She would kind of give me a peck on the forehead when she tucked me in at nighttime, but never held me, never hugged me, never, no, I love you. She was never proud of me, anything like that. So I didn't have any of that growing up. I certainly didn't have any of that in the churches that I was at. So when I went to this Assembly of God church, and the only reason I did is because there wasn't any other choice. So I was stationed in Heidelberg, Germany, in the military, and you don't have a whole lot of choice where to go to church. So you can go to the chapel, but that's very generic, and it's just almost perfunctory type rituals, and I had no interest in that. And then they had two churches for a choice. One was a Conservative Baptist church, and the other one was Assembly of God. And we did visit the Conservative Baptist church, and I immediately saw that it was so rules based, and I thought, I don't really like this. And so even though that had been my upbringing my whole life, I just thought, you know what, I don't feel comfortable here. So we went to the other church, and I didn't feel comfortable there either, but I wanted to try something new. And they had this song that they would play halfway through the praise and worship. And what was it's been so long, I don't know that I can remember the song. Anyway, basically it was about show everyone that you love everyone. And what we were supposed to do is go around and give everyone a hug and tell them that we love them. Well, I was not in the habit of hugging anyone at that point. And so when I first started there, I had a newborn baby. And so that was when I would nurse my baby so that nobody could get near me. I'd go in another room, nurse my baby, and just kind of miss that whole part of the service. Well, then people started coming up to me and actually giving me a hug from behind anyway. And I could not do anything about that. And at first it really, really bothered me. And then we had so many functions together as a church. So there were times when we would have potlucks every Sunday and then just stay for hours and hours and just, play outside. We had parties as often as you could think of a reason to have a party. I lived near several people in the church, and so we started just taking walks together on a regular basis. And sometimes we would just meet with other families during the week just for a random dinner. And we had small group Bible studies together in people's homes. And because we all lived very, very close together in the military, it quickly became our family. And so during holidays, for example, Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter, all that kind of stuff, most people did not go home to see their families. It was too far and cost too much money. And so we all just celebrated the big holidays together. And when you start doing that, well, they become your family. And so these people became way more family to me than I'd ever experienced before. And so as they began to hug me every week, eventually I just started to kind of melt and just kind of, learn that, okay, this is actually probably a good thing. This is long before I understood the value of physical touch, but I said, you know what, I'm just going to do my own experiment. And so I was on the board of directors for the Protestant Women of the Chapel, which was a ladies' Bible study. We had 60 ladies, and there were about 60 different denominations that were represented here. So everything. And what was interesting was that we never ever had an argument, even though we were doing Bible study together.
Yeah.
But it was a very cold place. And so I thought, well, I'm going to see if this really makes a difference. So I went in one day and I said, I'm going to start hugging every lady when she comes in the door. Now, these ladies grew up like I did. They weren't used to it. They were not used to it at all. And so some of them were very uncomfortable with that when I first started doing that. And I was equally uncomfortable. And so after a while, I noticed that they started hugging one another. And I didn't have to ever say anything. I just did it by example. But I started noticing that I changed inside. And that's when I really started learning how to love people and started doing actually Bible studies on how to love other people. So there were a lot of things that happened during those 6 years that we were there. But I look back and I did not know how to love people at all before I started going to that church.
Wow. So that's amazing. You grew up Christian in America and you went to church a lot, but yet you were not taught or even by example of how to love people,
Right.
right? And that rings so definite in my ear because as a person that identified as Black in a country where there's a dominance in the conservative, white people who identify as white, dominance, they're conservative, they're religious. And that's the feel that I get from that is that although you're giving me the rules, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, there's no love there. There's no connection there. Right. And I think it's because it in order for you to feel like you keep a certain level of power, you can't actually feel like you and I are the same, are connected, are one. You have to sort of have that division there, right? In order to perpetuate division, right? Because once you kind of come into an understanding that we really are all connected, right? I was telling you before, offline, there was something in the video where you were talking about you decided to wear pants, wear pants, and you were kind of afraid that God was going to do a thunderbolt or something if you put pants on because and we're going to talk in a minute about legalism. And you kind of did this in the video, like he was just kind of waiting, like, okay, I'll put these pants on, is lightning going to strike? And I totally connected to that because when I decided to stop going to church every Sunday, initially for me, I thought if I did not have a legitimate reason not to go to church, something bad was going to happen on Monday. I was going to have a bad week. Something was not going to work out. And so when I one day didn't go to church on Sunday and I did not have an excuse and I did not try to have an excuse, it was just I wasn't going. I literally was like, and the lightning didn't strike. And I connected to your story, right? And I don't even know you, but we literally had a very similar growth experience, right? And so I just thought that was interesting. But when you said that you were in Germany at this Church Assembly of God before you learned how to love people, I just thought that was amazing. All right, so now let's go here. You did the magic prayer when you were young. You got baptized. You got baptized a second time.
Right.
Then you got baptized a third time.
Right.
Did the magic prayer, did you not believe that the magic prayer worked?
Well, in Baptist circles, the magic prayer has to be accompanied by the baptism. And then, like, if you backslide, you have to have another baptism. So the baptism kind of covers for the backsliding, all those sins between.
And this is the funny part. You're gonna always, by definition, you're gonna always backslide, right? Because you're gonna always think something you're not supposed to think, and that's a sin, right? So it kind of keeps you on this loop, right? Which is good because it funds churches, it builds buildings, right? So it does all of that. This is what religion does. It causes you not to face your own reality, right? When I started to move away from religion, all I found is that I was having to face my own reality, whatever it was. I just had to say, Sean, your stuff, whatever that is, right? Just face it, right? If I'm holding a red cup, Sean, you're holding a red cup. Stop trying to make the red cup blue. It's red, right? Like just face what's the truth, right? If it's something that I want to change, Sean, you eat too many sweets. Stop eating so many sweets, right? Stop trying to psychologically fool myself into something, right? That psychological conflict that I think religion feeds. But the reason I think religion feeds it is because that's how it's funded. Religion isn't funded once you're not going to fund religion once you're willing to face your own reality.
Right.
right? Because once you're willing to face your own reality, you're not seeking somebody else to tell you your values. You kind of know what you should or shouldn't do based upon the fact that I respect you, right? And because I respect you and I think I'm connected to you, that's the limit. That's the limitation. My respect of you is my limitation, not so much not my upbringing in the church and the rules and regulations of do this, don't do this, don't do this, right? It's just the fact that I love you, I respect you, and I think we're connected, right? We're connected, and the reason why we're existent is because we're all connected. And if I can just connect with that understanding, right, then there's going to be things that I'm not going to do simply because I know you, Jennifer, right? Simply because I feel for you because I know how I feel, and so that is very interesting. Now I do want to go to this towards this last segment. Okay, my phones keep ringing. You talk about your new awareness about the law of Moses.
Okay.
And you started to talk about how it sort of clicked because you had started finally studying the Bible yourself, as opposed to defaulting believing what someone said. And it clicked for you that the law of Moses didn't apply to you.
Well, kind of. It didn't really click.
Okay, so explain that.
Yeah. So at the time, the church that I was in, which was a non-denominational, but pretty much a Reformed Baptist church, and we were there for probably 6 years or so. Then that was, they taught only from the Old Testament. So never, ever, ever were we taught anything from the New Testament or anything about Jesus or grace or anything like that. So it was just a heavy, heavy emphasis on the law, the law, the law. And then at the same time, and at home and in the evening, we were focused on the Messianic Judaism movement. And so, of course, they only focus on the law as well. So I was steeped in the law of Moses and wanted to live my whole life according to the law of Moses. I thought that was going to give me the structure that I needed. Those were the rules that if I could keep those 613 rules, then I would be okay. And so then there was a pastor. He's actually a professor at Dallas Theological Seminary that I was online one day, and I was actually saying that that the Bible says that we should still do slavery because that's what it says in the Old Testament, right? And so he came on and he said he started to challenge me that we were not.
Wait. Go back because I want to make sure you said so. You at that time you thought that we should still have slavery because the Bible.
Yes.
Wow.
Because that's
listen.
In the Old Testament, that's what they had, right? They had a lot of slaves, and the laws were about how you treat your slaves, but it didn't say that slavery was wrong. And actually, the Bible never says slavery was wrong.
The Bible doesn't. It does not. Yeah.
Right. So, so I living my whole life by the Bible, So he challenged me that we were actually not under the law of Moses. Well, that's the first time I'd ever heard that. And I was shocked. And so he started just peppering me with questions. And I remember the one that really stood out to me was, he says, do you go out in your backyard every time when it's your time of the month? And I thought, how dare you speak to me that way? And I knew that I didn't, but I thought, how dare you? And so it was the first time that I experienced real cognitive dissonance. And I was like, okay, well, wait a minute. Why am I not doing that? So just for a little context, how extreme I had become was I wanted my then husband and my son to wear robes like Moses. I didn't want them to shave the corners of their beards or to trim the corners of their beards. I want them to grow long beards. And I thought that we should be sacrificing animals in our backyard. And so I had become very, very extreme, right? It wasn't just the slavery thing, it was everything. So, because that's what I saw the Bible saying. And so that's what I really tried to live my life by. And so when he started peppering me with questions and he asked me if I was doing a whole bunch of these other laws, and I realized, okay, well, maybe I'm not doing as good as I thought I was. Then he offered to teach me a Bible study about the law of Moses. And he'd been teaching this Bible study for 35 years. I was actually his last student before he died. And so at the beginning, I had an idea that he might be right, but I wasn't willing to give up the law of Moses at all. And this is how I've always been as a truth seeker. I had to see it for myself. I had to be 100% convinced that he was right, that we were not under the law of Moses. And so for the next 90 days, I studied 8 to 12 hours a day on the law of Moses. I looked up, there's 450 verses in the Bible about the law of Moses. I looked up every single one, read them all in context. And I had a hard time finding myself in any one of those, all 450 passages. And I thought, well, that's not about me. That one's not about me. But I still was sure that it had to be about me, so I just kept studying and did his whole Bible study. During the course of that study, because he was a Dallas Theological Seminary professor, he also taught me logic, biblical grammar. He taught me how to read the biblical Hebrew and the biblical Greek and how to interpret them for myself. He taught me hermeneutics. And so he just taught me all of these Bible study tools that I had never, ever had before, because you don't get that as a regular person just going to church. And so anyway, at the end of those 90 days, it was like a light bulb just went off. After a lot of study, it was the light bulb. Oh, the law of Moses doesn't apply to me because it has no jurisdiction over me. I was never under their authority. It was only given to Israel, Old Covenant Israel, at Mount Sinai. Those people standing there. I wasn't there. I've not ever been a part of Old Covenant Israel. That's not me. And that law has nothing to do with me. So that was kind of that was my first step outside of regular Christianity.
Wow. That, that is absolutely an amazing story, because I think all my life, I thought that everything in the Bible was me, right? As far as, I thought that I was a Gentile, right?
Right.
And it never dawned on me, Jennifer, to ever look the word up.
Right.
Right? It just never dawned. It's just, I'm a Gentile. But then deep within me, right, I felt sort of slighted. Like, well, why would Jesus come for the Jews, and not for the Gentiles? Why am I second class? Why I'm second? I'm an afterthought, right? That was my thing. Why am I afterthought, right?
Right.
But I couldn't face the fact that I had that question, because I accepted the assumption that I was a Gentile. And you see how sometimes you can live your life by assumptions that limit your being, your becoming, and you've never thought to even notice that you're living by an assumption, and you dang sure ain't questioning the assumptions, because you don't even know you're living by the assumption, right? I did not recognize until I did that I was accepting an assumption that did not apply, or that was not true for me. And all I had to do was look up a word, right? And I love to make this little joke. I said, the Roman Catholics, the Protestant, the pushers of Calvinism, they never saw Google coming. Google messed it all up, right? Google messed it all up, right? Because now I don't necessarily got to go to the library and read all of these books that, sometimes can be hard to read. I can Google. I can go onto a YouTube channel. I can go on somebody's channel like yours that do very great breakdown of things, right? They never saw Google coming. And what Google allowed is for my own thinking to come in, right? See, at first you don't get to have your own thinking or non-thinking. You just went to church. They say this, you believed it. And you make this point that